content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you.
Yo, what's cracking, man? I'm Gigi. You tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up with no chasers. Real talk. Before I get things started, like I always do, man, I give a shout out to the haters out there. How y'all doing, man? I hope y'all passing a good one. Hater. Hater. Also, if you haven't done so already, man, can you hit the like button when you come in? If you haven't subscribed to the channel, man, feel free, man. You're welcome. Subscribe. We ain't gonna hurt you. Hit the bell notification button as well while you subscribe so you can stay abreast of what's cracking here on the Green Gorilla channel. And as I always do, I want to give a shout out to each and every member of the Green Gorilla channel on both Patreon and YouTube, because they help me keep things going here, man. So big up to Michael Ross, Divine Love Ridge, Afro Troop TV, Show Me, Brotherly Love 215, Jay Cleveland Green, Raiz Morji, Spain Man, Lee Ways, and Tahuti of New Comet. Big up. Big up to No Sleep, Ben Cannon Kenton, Seven Coast Dojo, Apex Prowler, Anthony Davis, I'm Just Jules, Black Swerve 404, An Honest Look, Sherman Rowe, Ricky Dawson, and Stefan. Big up, man. Big up to Julius Ferguson, Lord Hamal, True 7360, Mr. Me Too, Call for President, Leading from the Back, Gold Professor, AKs and Curtains, H-Town, Roguish, The Bill Monger, and BD Main. Big up, man. Big up to Adrian Thomas, Electrician 480, Bingo, Cutting Up with the Jones, Zanko, D. Scott, Path Guy, Pete Rock, Aaron Peters, Bar Notice, and Dar. Big up, man. Big up to Vincent Lindsay, Beautiful Trauma, Quiz the Poet, Black Wizard ADOS, Jazz Tech, Shadow Observer, Sugar T, Artisan MC, Kyle J. Sura, Kareen, and Troy Warren. Big up. Big up to Mrs. KP Bailey, Alan Wiley, The Face, Life of Commerce, Dreamlit, A. Wilson's Ghost, Timothy Blewett, Jeffrey Speed, Marvin Battle Jr., and Mark Hope. Big up. Big up to Adam, BGS Ibmore, Ignatz Mouse, Brian Peaks, Papa Dida, Scott Haywood, Black Uru, Dr. Tree 33, Leroy Honeycutt, 77 Bass X, and Brian McMurray. Big up. Big up to Karen S., Charles Rogers, Rick Ross, Sandra Jean, Charles Gilmore, Greg, Barry Little, Mr. Valentino, Jason Hales, Black Men Being Brutally Honest, Cameron 87, and Dr. Rock. Big up. Big up to Mark Swift, Odd Collar, Donald Watts, Coach Hotep, Old Soul Chief, Mr. Blue Collar, TD Hip Hop Media, Drew Main, Mr. Heat, Sir Anthony, and ML Law. Big up. Big up to Universal 178, Rasheed Barnes, Aaron Smith, DH, Red Pill Revelator, Aaron Infinite, Dr. Tiasan Johnson, Kalan Jakala, Hostile Adept, and W Pierre 1. Also, I can't forget my brothers, man, who are deceased. Forrest Windu, David Carroll, and Kevin Samuels. Big up to them, man. And on my Patreon side, man, I want to give a shout out to Chris Flowers, Christopher Burton, Daxby, J Live, Rashawn Phillips, Keith Bass, Nick Rock One, Albert C, Dr. Ben Vincent, Jay Cleveland Green, I'm the Light of My Father, Waffle Weave, Tyrone Hampton, Darnell Smith, Excalibur, Anu 219, Pursuer Prisoner, Taz, Dragon 59, Jay Bailey, Mr. Michi, Mo Mal, and Asangwa. Big up to all y'all, man. Thank you so much for your ongoing support, for real. Thank you so much for your ongoing support. You deserve a round of applause. And if you want to support the Green Gorilla channel on an ongoing basis, here's how you do it. I'll be back with the show to greet y'all in the chat. And, to get to the subject matter at hand, man. What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel, the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chaser. Today, I want to introduce you to my new membership program that consists of 5 levels where you can invest in the Green Gorilla channel on a monthly basis and receive level-specific perks. Memberships are special because they improve the quality of the content of the channel and will help me to be able to keep the channel going. Now, to participate in the Green Gorilla channel membership program, all you have to do is hit the join button, which is located right next to the subscribe button on my channel page. Now, for all of my subscribers who decide not to participate in my membership program, nothing will change. The content will keep coming the way it always has. Thanks for watching, and be careful out here, people. Bless. All right, man, we back. You know who I am. I'm GG. You tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, and no chasers, man. You know what I'm saying? So if you can, man, right now we got 61 people watching concurrently, and we got 35 likes. Can we please get the likes up, man, so we can, promote the stream? Please. Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, recently I've been doing like a series of shows related to the ghetto and, basically covering issues about the ghetto, talking about its formation, justice, the behavior of the people there, just various subjects related to the ghetto, because we have a lot of opinions about the ghetto and the people who live there. We call people there strags, pookies, thugs, criminals, undesirables, whores, 304s. I mean, whatever the case may be, man, we have a lot of things to say about the ghetto. But, typically when we do our assessments of the ghetto and people who live there, there's a lot of blind spots because we haven't thought about it meticulously. But before I even get into what I'm about to do, man, because I got to give you a recap of what we've been discussing thus far as a prelude, man, I want to inform you again. I am reading from a book that is entitled Dark Ghettos, Injustice, Dissent, and Reform. The author of the book is a black philosopher. His name is Tommy Shelby, okay? A Harvard professor who wrote a book about the ghetto, and it's along the tradition, it follows in the tradition of Kenneth Clark, okay? So that's what I'm reading from, all right? Now, I want to give a shout out to True Asiatic Allah. Peace to you, brother. Peace to Cutting Up with the Jones. Peace to Eclectic Agitator. Big up to I'm Listening. Grab Second Gear Eddie. Leroy Honeycutt, I see you out there. Charles Faulkner, woo! I see you out there, bro. Spain Man, David Caldwell, I see you out there. Chef Mike's Roundtable, I see you. Joe's, I see you. Christopher Clipper, I see you. I see y'all out there. I just want to give a shout out to y'all, man. Big up for joining the stream today. And so let's just get to the business. Again, I told you what I was reading. I was reading a book. It's called Dark Ghettos. So if we're going to talk about the ghetto, let's talk about it from an intellectual perspective where all of the bases are covered. This is not a dumb guy writing this book, man. It's a smart individual. He's a Harvard professor. He's, for the most part, not left many stones unturned as it comes to giving evaluations about the ghetto. We're just in the preliminary stages of reading this text. And I'm going to continue to read the text here and there. I'm not going to do it back to back to back to back to back, but I am going to dedicate and allocate some time to doing so. It is what it is. But I got to give you a recap. I got to give you an assessment, an outline, and a dumbration of where we are now. Okay? So let's take care of that, man. All right. I'm assuming everybody can see that. I'm assuming everybody sees that. All right. Again, the name of the book is Dark Ghettos, Injustice, Dissent, and Reform. It's written by a black philosopher. His name is Tommy Shelby. He's a Harvard professor, okay? And he says basically, when you talk about the ghetto, a lot of people have a lot of things to say. And they usually come up with assessments about what to do related to what he calls the medical model, which is to describe some feature of ghettos, like, for example, the overwhelming single mother family composition or youth violence, identify the linchpin that keeps ghettos in place, like, for example, joblessness, segregation, or whatever, propose a cost-effective solution that will remove the linchpin, a jobs program, integration, or something like that. And then the expectation is that the ghettos will eventually recede. They will subside. This, he says, is the medical model, and the aim of it and those working within it is to basically increase the material welfare of the people who live in the ghettos. And they want to do so through what they consider to be narrowly targeted interventions into the lives of the people who live there, because they, like doctors, can assess what's going wrong and they know what to do. They have the solutions, they have the assessments, and here's what they propose. Okay? Now, the author of the text says, well, there's some issues with this kind of approach. First of all, when you use the approach, more than likely you're going to suffer from what he calls the status quo bias problem. You know, you want to integrate the ghetto poor into an existing social system. That's what you're attempting to do, without viewing any resistance that they might have to fully cooperate as a sign that maybe the system needs some reform itself. Maybe the people don't necessarily need as much reform as the system itself needs reform. But people don't usually think about it that way. They think that the people are somehow backwards, right? So the features of society that need to be altered get little scrutiny, whereas the people get all the scrutiny. They get all the smoke, okay? They get all the blame. Also, he says, there's the problem of downgraded agency. So, you know, the everyday and often seemingly misunderstood choices of the people who live in disadvantaged communities, when seen through the lens of the medical model, these actions are perceived as lacking moral content or political intent, or he says at worst, they're just perceived as pathological, the actions of the disadvantaged denizens of the ghetto, okay? And he says the status quo bias invites us to see dysfunction where maybe perhaps there is resistance, not just dysfunction, okay? Also, he says, many people who use the medical model suffer from what he calls an unjust advantage blind spot problem. Why? Because people who are advantaged in any system, they benefit from, more than likely, an unjust social structure, right? And then not only that, people who are advantaged tend to think that they're hyper moral, or they've done everything that the system announces that they should have done in order to be advantaged as they are. So they perceive themselves as being virtuous in essence. And that the people who are suffering or who are disadvantaged, those people, you know, they've brought whatever hardships exist on themselves. That's typically how the unjust advantage blind spot problem goes. He also talks about the stand and fight tradition in the black community, where you're not supposed to just suffer in silence, but you're supposed to assert yourself in a variety of ways. In the press, I guess one could now say social media, in legislative halls, in the courts, on the streets, there is a tradition of black people where resistance is a feature or a function of their political agency. So he says, you know, what he's doing is part of that tradition to a certain extent. All right. There's another idea that you'll see in the text that's re-emphasized, or that comes up or resurfaces again and again. It's called liberal egalitarianism. Okay. So what is it? It's a form of liberalism that takes not only negative liberty seriously, not only civic equality seriously. And if you don't know what negative liberty is rights, like rights not to be interfered with. Civic equality means that everyone has equal opportunity to occupy and to hold public positions, even private positions, and to contribute to collective decision making. But he says also, substantive economic fairness must be a feature of the society. And your economic position should reflect your efforts and your merits, not just how you start off in society. You shouldn't be determined to be poor if you're born poor. If you are meritorious and if you work hard, you should be able to lift yourself out of your initial starting point. That's how the argument goes, okay? Non-ideal theory basically can be contrasted with ideal theory, which basically says strict compliance to the principles that characterize a well-ordered society or something that, we expect to happen, right? But non-ideal theory is worked out after you get in an ideal, and it addresses what you're supposed to do when ideal conditions don't necessarily obtain in the real world, okay? So how do you go about addressing what people are to do when the situations aren't ideal, okay? Then he talks about something called the basic structure of society. Thank you, Mr. Me Too. Appreciate that. Mr. Me Too. Got to give him a little shout out for that. Appreciate that, brother. Give him a little bomb. Appreciate that. So I'm just I'm filling in where I left off so that you can have some idea of where this theory is going, what he's said thus far in the text. So the author, Tommy Shelby, says that there's something called the basic structure of society. Anybody who's read John Rawls or has been exposed to his work knows that this is a Rawlsian concept, right? So the basic structure of any society is comprised of political, economic, and social institutions, which make fruitful social cooperation possible and that distributes benefits and burdens of the society in general, okay? And the basic structure of a society, he says, along with Rawls, can be more or less fair or unfair, okay? There's another principle that comes up called reciprocity. And this idea says, well, society is in and of itself, by definition, a system of social cooperation over time. That's what a society is. So if there's going to be benefits and burdens, they should be shared as much as possible by each citizen. It shouldn't just be one group of citizens gets all the benefits of social cooperation and others get all the burdens. Well, there should be a sharing of benefits and burdens distributed throughout society. That's how it's supposed to go. Okay? Each citizen has a duty to do his or her fair share of taking on the burdens of social cooperation. Not just getting benefits, but also, taking on burdens. I mean, one of the key ways that people, even in this culture, but they don't anymore, one of the ways that you would have to take on burdens is by serving in the military. Compulsory service, not, well, I'm volunteering. No, you gotta serve, right? But we don't do that anymore. You don't do it. Hey, yeah, tell them, David, man, get the likes up, man. Please get the likes up, bro. Don't free ride. Get the likes up, man. We got 50 likes. All right, then he talks about racism, because there are a lot of people who say that racism doesn't exist anymore. Racism doesn't exist anymore. There's no racism anymore. And no racism no more. I call them daffies. Dancing daffies. There's no such thing as racism anymore. There's no such racism no more. Okay. All right, Daffy. dancing, tap dancing, daffy. But anyway, he says that there are three kinds of racism: ideological, institutional, and structural. So what is ideological racism? It's beliefs, okay? And implicit judgments that misrepresent reality, social reality, and that function through this distortion or misrepresentation of reality to bring about or perpetuate unjust social relations amongst people who are supposed to be members of specific races, okay? And he says it can be intentional or unintentional. Ideological racism can be something you do with intent, or it could be a part of your unconscious bias, okay? He says that there is institutional racism. You have extrinsic and intrinsic institutional racism. Extrinsic institutional racism happens when an institution has a policy that's race neutral in its content and its public rationale, but nevertheless has a disparate impact on a disadvantaged racial group. Whereas intrinsic institutional racism happens when the goals of the institution themselves are intrinsically racially biased. Okay, so a Klan, the Ku Klux Klan would be an institution that is intrinsically racially biased. Whereas, you know, say for example, maybe, you know, a grandfather clause might not be. But I mean, you know that the goal, you know that the object is to actually have it, make it so that black people can't vote, but it doesn't explicitly say that. It just, in a circuitous way, it creates the outcome that has a impact on disadvantaged or you know, a so-called subordinate racial group, okay? Then you have structural racism, which is, you know, the accumulated effects of both institutional and ideological racism systemically in a specific society, okay? Shout out to the person who just gave me a cash app. Appreciate you, Hakeem. Appreciate you, bro. Appreciate you, brother. You deserve a bomb for that. Oh, one could say, you know, like some police policy, like say, for example, stop and frisk. One could argue, you know, that's extrinsic institutional racism. You're not coming out and explicitly saying, okay, well, you know, we're going to stop and frisk black folks. But I mean, you know, when you put them in a specific neighborhood where there's predominantly black folks there, and you have this as a policy, whereas you don't have that policy in Manhattan or something like that, but you got it in Brooklyn or the Bronx or something like that, then you know that, that's extrinsic institutional racism occurring, okay? Then he says there's something called laissez-faire racism, which is basically, you hear this a lot in this space, okay? So that's basically putting forth the claim that blacks are disadvantaged because they just make bad choices and they have self-defeating attitudes. Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. Like, I mean, Negroes are lazy. That's the argument, right? You Negroes are lazy, okay? And people who make these claims usually are, he says, making them because they have A, veiled racial hostility. They're hiding their racial hostility. B, they want to hold on to privileges that are unjust, or they are just indifferent, don't care about black suffering, right? So this is called laissez-faire racism, okay? And it should be well clear by now. I don't know how many times I have to say it, but black people have the same kind of disposition towards black people as white people do. And it starts in childhood. I've shown you this 1,000 times. I think I got to show it again. I think I need to show it again. Yeah, I'm going to show it again, bro. I think I need to show it again.
is the black doll? And which one is the white doll?
That one.
Which doll is the pretty doll? Which doll is the nice doll? Which doll is the bad doll? Which doll is the nice doll? And which doll is the bad doll? And why is that doll pretty?
Because she's white and he has 2 eyes.
Which doll is the ugly doll? Why is that doll ugly?
Because he's black.
Which doll looks most like you?
Like me?
Yeah, which one looks like you?
And that one.
Okay.
That doll.
So you get the picture, man. You know, I mean, you get the picture. It's a sad picture, but it's a real picture. It's a real picture. It's a sad picture. So this whole notion that, you know, black people can't be racist to other black people, that's a lie. It starts in childhood. If you got little kids saying, you know, the kids that look like them are evil, they bad, they ugly, that's already, you already starting off behind the curve. You're already starting off behind the curve. Whether you like it or not. So anyway, then he talks about discrimination, which, by the way, discrimination of all kinds is not bad. We discriminate all the time, and rightfully so. Like, for example, we don't allow 9-year-olds to drive. How many of y'all ever heard of the little dude woo-wop? You ever heard of woo-wop, man? Look, I like woo-wop, man. It's amusing to me. I'm not going to say I necessarily like woo-wop as much as, you know, the skits and the shorts that they have surrounding woo-wop are entertaining to me. It's a little boy who's, you know, talking like a grown person or acting like a grown person. It's entertaining to see, but sad to some degree as well. But we don't allow kids who are 9, 6, 10 years, we don't allow them to drive. We discriminate against them. We don't allow them to vote. We don't allow them to drink alcohol. What's up, Ronald Neal? What's good with you, bro? What's happening with you, man? I'm trying to educate them, man. You know, a lot of times they want to be caught up in the drama, man, but I'm trying to get them straight, bro. I'm trying to get them straight, bro. So anyway, you know, basically he says that discrimination can be wrongful, but it has to meet certain criteria that make it wrong or unjustifiable. So he says, when you got a person or a group and they're denied an opportunity, like a job, a resource, like a grant, or a public benefit, like access to public places or votes, right, or the ability to vote, or, you know, access to a subsidy, this constitutes unjust racial discrimination if the unfavorable treatment is based on the presumption, maybe implicit, that one race is inferior to another. B, is based on racial considerations when race is not a relevant principle of differentiation that would further a legitimate end. C, has been caused by a racially biased application of institutional rules. When you have discrimination that takes any of these forms, it is fundamentally unjust and intrinsically wrong. Now, I want you to go back to B. I want you to look at this subsection B. It says, based on racial considerations when race is not a relevant principle of differentiation that would further a legitimate end. One could argue that affirmative action is a form of discrimination, but that it is a form of discrimination that furthers a legitimate end. Or, you know, quotas in colleges or something like that. Okay? So one can say in some instances that discrimination, in order to redress previous discrimination is okay. Okay? One could make that assessment or assertion. Okay? Then the author talks about something called absolute poverty, which is basically you don't have access to the basic necessities, okay? Such that it becomes life-threatening. Then you have something he calls relative poverty, which is a percentage of average income that, more than likely falls beneath that average income. Then there's a concept that he promotes called equal opportunity. And of course, if you read along with me, you'll know that Tommy Shelby promotes this ideal. And it's basically this. If equal opportunity is actually going to be fair, substantively, and not just in name or formally or procedurally, individuals have to have equal life prospects. So in a system of social cooperation where each has equal standing, and all are entitled to share equitably in its benefits, people who are born into affluent families shouldn't have better life prospects than those born into families with limited or more limited material means. Meaning that your status and your position in society shouldn't be fixed, predicated to how you start. It should pretty much reflect your merits and your efforts, okay? That's how the story goes, right? Also, there is a concept that he says that he rejects, which is socialist equal opportunity, which is different from the one that Shelby, accepts and promotes. So, socialist equal opportunity basically says if you got social economic inequalities that come from your talents, your native talents, the things you were born with, right? That's unjust. Because some people are going to be endowed with social usefully talents by birth, and then you're not really actually responsible for what you have by birth. So it's not a grounds to expect greater economic rewards from the system of social cooperation. So the principle basically calls for the elimination of what I call natural lottery advantages. So some people are born pretty, some people are born ugly, some people are born tall, some people are born short, some people are born, with the ability to run fast, some people are born just slow, okay? So, strict socialist equal opportunity would say, well, just because you got these greater natural advantages doesn't mean that you're supposed to prosper more than someone who doesn't. So Shelby rejects this, and he utilizes something called the difference principle in order to do it. The difference principle, by the way, is a Rawlsian principle. You should all know it by now if you've been keeping up with what I've been talking about, okay? So the difference principle basically says if you have a useful talent, you should be more highly rewarded because that's going to encourage the development and the use of such talents, which is going to benefit everybody, including those who have abilities that are less socially useful or less talented, people who are less talented. Like, for example, if you have a high IQ and you have the capacity to endure boredom and to study, whereas other people might have a short attention span and they don't have a high intelligence quotient or whatever the case may be, those individuals deserve the outcome of that study and that high IQ because it gives them access to positions that they wouldn't even go into otherwise if they don't get rewarded for it. Like, who's going to become a medical doctor? Who's going to go to school for 15 years to be a neurosurgeon after college if they're not going to be paid handsomely for having done it? Not very many people, okay? So that's how that story goes. Shout out to PM Nadon. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that donation, man. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. So he says, the ghetto. What is that? It's basically a metropolitan neighborhood marked by racial segregations and multiple forms of disadvantage. Okay? Then he defines segregation, which segregation can be either good or bad, but not necessarily bad or necessarily good. Other things have to be factored into the equation to determine whether or not it's good or bad. But when he talks about segregation, he's not talking about Jim Crow segregation per se, but he's talking about residential patterns in which neighborhoods within a metropolitan region have different racial compositions, with one racial group in a given neighborhood outstripping its percentage in the region as a whole, while other racial groups are there in smaller numbers, right? And he says not all segregation is unjust. Then he talks about something called racial clustering, where you got two or more similarly segregated neighborhoods that are close to one another, forming a racial band of segregated residential areas. Okay? Then he talks about something called concentrated poverty. A neighborhood, has concentrated poverty if the poverty rate of its denizens is 40% or higher. Okay? Then he talks about something called concentrated disadvantage. Okay? Now, concentrated poverty has something to do with disadvantage to a certain extent, right? So what is concentrated disadvantage? It's the percentage of people in a neighborhood who suffer from multiple deficits in well-being. What are those? Low income, poverty, low birth weight, abnormal life expectancy, low, right? Enduring physical and mental illness, disability, alcohol and drug addiction, homelessness, lack of shelter, low educational attainment, dysfunctional family life, social isolation, unhealthy ties of affiliation, lack of self-esteem, unemployment, underemployment, chronic fatigue, inability to participate in public life, high incarceration, high felony conviction rates. So there are a whole bunch of indices or indicators of concentrated disadvantage, okay? But then there's also something called a disadvantaged neighborhood. So whereas concentrated disadvantage has to do with people, disadvantaged neighborhoods have to do with spaces, okay? So a disadvantaged neighborhood is a place that suffers from a relative lack of nearby or readily accessible goods, services, and opportunities that are needed for human flourishing. So what does he mean by that? So low performing schools, high rates of crime and violence, dilapidated and insufficient housing stock, low property values, exposure to environmental toxins, limited employment opportunities, few good local grocery stores, visible signs of disorder, few places to recreate, inefficient or expensive public transportation. So that's a lot. But we know neighborhoods like this all throughout America. They're dotted in metropolitan areas all throughout the United States. Okay? Then he says there's something called type 2 ghettos, which are black neighborhoods that have moderate levels of poverty, and their concentrated disadvantage is damn near just as severe as that of ghetto neighborhoods, which basically have concentrated disadvantage, right? All the way through and through. But the symptoms are similar, okay? So then, we started to get into chapter 2. So, chapter 2 is like, okay, well, how do we solve the problem of ghettos? How do we get rid of them, right? And there's some people who argue that racial segregation in and of itself is wrong. It's unjust. And so they see neighborhood racial segregation as the primary cause of ghetto poverty itself. And so they say, well, how do we solve it? Well, let's just start integrating disadvantaged neighborhoods. Let's just do that. Let's just integrate them. Now, people who adhere to this viewpoint, they want to increase and foster interracial contact in neighborhoods as they think that this is necessary to repair the damage that has been done to the ghetto poor and to lift them out of their burdens. But he, I think, Tommy Shelby, is an advocate of something called egalitarian pluralism, which rejects this new integrationism, but he really doesn't actually define it. So today what I'm going to do is start reading the section where I left off to where he begins to define egalitarian pluralism and why he thinks that new integrationism is misguided. That's where we are. Now, if you say you want to talk about the ghetto, let's just not just start calling people names and shit, which is what a lot of you guys do. You just want to start saying shit like, oh, these niggas ain't shit and so on and so forth. I'm just sick of that. I'm sick of that bullshit. To me, most of you motherfucking niggas is tap dancing any goddamn way. You dancing daffies and shit. I ain't gonna say all of you, but it's a whole bunch of you motherfuckers. They got a whole bunch of shit to say. You ignorant as fuck. You really actually a step removed from poverty, your goddamn self, but you got all these goddamn moral proclamations to make about people who live in the hood and shit. But I'm not here for that, man. If we're going to study this phenomenon, we're going to talk about the hood and the ghetto and the people who live there. Let's have an exhaustive conversation and not just some conversation where you can demonstrate that somehow you're morally superior while you suffer from low self-esteem your goddamn self. And you hate niggas worse than white people do. That was my rant for a quick minute. But I'm tired of hearing that bullshit. Niggas come from single mama families and shit their goddamn self and got all kind of so-called pookies in their own goddamn family and uneducated and illiterate motherfuckers in their own family, but they got so much to say. Fucks me up, man. I'm straight, I swear to God, it fucks me up, man. So let me get to that. This is where I left off. Close this shit right here. This is where we left off. Black self-segregation. We already talked about how the new integrationists see the solution to ghetto-ness or the ghetto problems is by having white people come into contact with black folks. That's what it calls for. Now, at some point, I'll, begin to retrace the steps of this chapter, but now you got a good understanding of where we left off so we can go into where we got to go. And this book talks about damn near everything related to the ghetto. Everything that's been talked about or discussed here has been already discussed in this text, but in a more sophisticated fashion. So he says, and this is chapter 2. Now consider the residential preferences of blacks. Though integration is proposed as a remedy for black disadvantages, it is still regarded as an imperative for blacks. Among others, of course. So if it is the case that, like black people need to be integrated in order to be saved from their disadvantages, they have to, as an imperative, they have to agree with it and go along with it. They have to submit to this plan of integration, right? So if residential integration is a requirement of justice, blacks' residential choices that are incompatible with integration or contrary to their duty of justice, meaning that they're doing something wrong if they don't agree to integrate according to this view. On the new integrationist vision, then either generally blacks lack the moral prerogative to choose black neighborhoods when the option of integrated neighborhoods is available, or considerations of corrective justice override blacks' otherwise permissible residential prerogatives. And that's saying a lot. Either they lack the ability, the moral prerogative to choose black neighborhoods when the option of integrated neighborhoods is available, meaning they have to choose the integrated neighborhood. Or they have to consider corrective justice, which is going to override some other choice that they might have, right? So against this vision of racial justice and political ethics, I argue, and this is Tommy Shelby, I argue that black self-segregation in neighborhoods does not violate, it need not violate, blacks' duty of justice. And thus, justice cannot require neighborhood integration. So in other words, you can't force black people to integrate. The new integrationists want to save black people according to this idea of integrating neighborhoods. He's rejecting this. He's saying this is not a duty of justice for black folks, that they don't have to do this. So some black people do, he says, of course, desire to live in integrated communities. They want to garner the advantages associated with white neighborhoods. They want to live around movie theaters and grocery stores that aren't food deserts. They want to have access to transportation and jobs. They want entertainment and recreation to be readily available to them, right? So he says they want these advantages associated with white neighborhoods, or they want to avoid the disadvantages typical of ghettos. Which we know it's a whole bunch of motherfucking daffy ass niggas in this space that want to do just that. And I'm being deprecating here because I just don't like the tone of some of you Negroes. But anyway, but the residential choices of some blacks arguably increase or maintain segregation. And that's the crux, right? The residential choices of some blacks arguably increase or maintain segregation. For example, some blacks avoid residing in white neighborhoods because they don't want to have to deal with experiencing white folks. They don't want to be around them. To limit unpleasant experiences with whites. The main concern is to elude, to get away from, to remove oneself from interpersonal discrimination, racist treatment, and hostile attitudes. They don't want to have to deal with the shit. Another reason people, black folks, right, maintain segregation through their choices and where they live is to avoid interracial conflict, which can and generally does reflect the operation of stereotypes and implicit bias, but it needn't be motivated by hostility or animus. A lot of racial conflict comes from, he says, unconscious or implicit bias. Okay? There is also, he says, the positive preference for a black neighborhood. Some black folks want to live with other black folks. Group self-segregation need not be entirely voluntary, as it may be partly a response to unjust exclusion or economic disadvantage. But black self-segregation is still a choice, albeit a constrained one, when there are other acceptable options. For example, integrated neighborhoods or neighborhoods with few whites or blacks, which there sometimes are. We should also distinguish residential group self-segregation from closing ranks. So here's another definition. Closing ranks. What is closing ranks? The defensive tactics a group uses to strengthen its internal social ties and to exclude outsiders from full affiliation. Okay, so that's what closing ranks is. Both whites and blacks, dominant groups and subordinate groups can close ranks. And residential self-segregation can itself be a way of closing ranks. However, residential self-segregation and closing ranks need not coincide. Blacks, for instance, control some organizations and may assign blacks and whites to different roles within them, or exclude whites altogether. But many who participate in black organizations may live in an integrated neighborhood. So he's giving an example. Whenever you see, for instance, that's fleshing out something abstractly but concretely. Okay? There can be closed social institutions and organizations within an otherwise integrated neighborhood. And there can be informal ranks closure in an integrated neighborhood. You click it up. Okay? If a social group largely controls an entire social domain, such as employment, education, government administration, or residential and commercial property, and equal access to this domain is necessary for citizens to have equal civic standing and fair prospects in life, then closing ranks in that domain will naturally lead to serious injustices. Now, that's important to understand. I kind of agree with that. So I'm going to highlight that. But the problem is not closing ranks per se. And when you see per se, it means in and of itself. Per se. The problem is that no group should be permitted to prevent others from gaining access to these vital goods and positions. And this is why it is dangerous for a social group to have a virtual monopoly over these goods and positions, for they may be tempted to exclude others from access to them, keeping these advantages within the group, or may permit access, but only on unfavorable terms. When I think about that, no offense, I think of little hat people. Why won't they, do they close ranks? Do they try to prevent others from gaining access to vital goods and positions? Or to try to develop a monopoly over certain goods and positions? And to try to exclude others and only include their own group into the enjoyment of the goods and the positions? Blacks do sometimes engage in residential self-segregation and close their social networks to whites, including within black institutions and organizations. But they do not control sufficient resources or have enough power to prevent whites from gaining access to important goods and positions on fair terms. That's correct. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Yes, do black folks engage sometimes in residential self-segregation and close their social networks to white folks, meaning that they they agglomerate in ways in which they exclude others to a certain extent? Yes. Including the institutions that they create and the organizations that they have. But they don't control, black folks, sufficient resources or have enough power to prevent whites from gaining access to important goods and positions on fair terms. They don't. Then he goes on to say, moreover, the permissibility of self-segregation and closing ranks depends not only on their actual or likely effects, but also on whether their aims can be given adequate justification. So I haven't read this part, so I need to see what he means here. So I'm deciphering this just as much as are you. So what does he mean here? Blacks may sometimes engage in self-segregation or close ranks out of prejudice towards other groups. So that's aim, intention. That's what's being, emphasized here. So blacks can sometimes engage in self-segregation or closed ranks because they're prejudiced. I don't like honkies. But often they engage in these practices to protect their shared interests in a society where they are deeply disadvantaged and vulnerable to mistreatment and political marginalization. Okay? So let me make a note here. Could be because they're prejudiced. Could be because of self-defense or self-protection. Move that up a little bit. When motivated by a sense of justice rather than narrow group interest, these practices express political solidarity. Acting on considerations of solidarity, some blacks might seek to live in black neighborhoods where they can expect to find high concentrations of politically like-minded individuals. This black political concentration could enable them to influence local policies and to elect officials who will listen to their concerns, and so is, in principle, an important source of political empowerment. So when the aim is solidarity, especially amongst black people, the idea or the expectation is that you can live around people who have similar values, and maybe perhaps we could take those values and use them in order to develop political coalitions so that our issues can be redressed. Then he goes on to say, it's difficult to see how practices of self-segregation and social closure among whites could be reasonably thought to promote justice or protect the vulnerable and marginalized. I agree with that. I agree with that. You already got all the goddamn advantages. I can see a group of poor whites doing it, but like rich ass white people, man, who already got like $500,000 saved up and they already got, for their retirements and they got property, 2.5 mil and all that. Nah, bruh. All that closing ranks around y'all. No, that's some bullshit. That's actual bourgeoisie bullshit. Just keep the shit for yourself. Mine. All mine. Yet black solidarity is different because it can be defended as a group-based effort to fight for racial justice or to protect the group's members from race-based maltreatment. The point of this self-segregation is not then to hoard advantages, thank you, hallelujah, or to prevent non-blacks from gaining access to the things they need. It is instead a component of an ethic of resistance to injustice. I agree. I agree. It is what it is. I agree. Then he goes on to say, though, still, one can be committed to black solidarity without preferring to live in a predominantly black neighborhood or seeking black communal independence, which I agree with as well. Black solidarity could be expressed as a desire to live in neighborhoods with a black critical mass, 25 to 50%, and therefore shouldn't be equated with racial separatism. Moderate concentrations of blacks in metropolitan neighborhoods could enable black social networks to flourish and black institutions to be sustained. Most whites, however, consider a neighborhood with a significant number of blacks to be intolerable or unappealing. You said that right. that goes without saying, but I'm going to highlight it anyway. So blacks rarely have the opportunity to live in integrated neighborhoods with a black critical mass. They are usually forced to choose, when they have a choice at all, between segregated black neighborhoods and neighborhoods with very few or no blacks, and most, so it would seem, prefer the former. Okay? Now, I'm real life, man. My parents, my mother, and my stepfather, they fucking refused to move to the North County in the city of St. Louis. Refused to do it. I mean, especially when it was first beginning to be such that blacks were moving to North County. I remember, one of my best friends in the world, I call him Jay, JC, whatever. His mom and dad, they used to live on Margaretta and fucking, what? I think it was Redbud and Margaretta. Before them kids went to high school, I think right when the oldest daughter was about to enter into high school was when they got the fuck out of the city of St. Louis and moved to North County, Hazelwood area. Which was predominantly white at the time. Because I'm talking about 84, 83. There wasn't a lot of black folks in North County then. Sure, people were beginning to migrate there, but it wasn't like a gang of black folks in Hazelwood. But it eventually, 5 to 10 years, especially when you got a lot of black people moving there, white flight is what it is. Because, the reason I said, most whites consider a neighborhood with a significant number of blacks to be intolerable or appealing. So they got the hell up out of there. But I remember when they first moved there, and I used to go visit them doggone there every other week and spend the night because, it's like family, but they ain't exactly blood family, but they social family. My mother and JC's mother, they went to Lincoln University together. I don't know if they was roommates. I think they might have been roommates one semester or something, but their friendship lasted till fucking death. And when we speak first, all North County, man. But it just so happened that Hazelwood was closer, it was further on the outskirts to the north. Hazelwood damn near where the fucking Mississippi River is. On the outskirts of the border of Illinois. So I'd have to say, yeah, Ferguson pretty much damn near the same way. Look, this is what happened in the city of St. Louis. The Pruitt-Igoe projects, all them came down. And so a whole bunch of black folks who was living in the inner city began to move, or like downtown area in the project, they began to move north. The South Side contained them for a while, but then they moved to the South too. And they moved mostly to North City. Not North County, North City. And I'm just answering questions right now. Fleshing out, the phenomena, so to speak. But that was the cause of the influx of the so-called undesirable people, the so-called pookies and shit like that. But my mother and stepfather, they were like, we're not leaving. We're not going nowhere. I don't want to go live with them folks. And my OG is a social worker and shit, you know what I'm saying? And my boy's mom was a teacher, you know what I'm saying? And his father worked in the government in an organization called Blacks in Government. So it is the case that even if you don't live in a predominantly white black neighborhood, you can still be dedicated to performing closing ranks activity in other regards. I've seen it firsthand. So I see what he's saying here, okay? So anyway, going on, a commitment to black solidarity should be distinguished from a desire for black community. Now, this is important here. I got to see what he has to say about this because, let's see. A commitment to black solidarity has to be or should be distinguished from a desire for black community. And he has that emphasized. Let's see why. Blacks, like members of religious or ethnic groups, often have an affinity for one another. I can't tell with a lot of you Negroes nowadays, boy. You tap dancing motherfuckers, boy. Can't tell. I can't tell. I can't tell. Blacks often have an affinity for one another, and these valuable social ties sometimes express themselves as a desire to live together in the same neighborhoods. But this desire for black residential community needn't be politically motivated or conceived as resistance to injustice. It needn't, though it might be based on shared heritage, culture, or lifestyle. Some blacks may simply desire the intrinsic pleasure and comfort that come from living among people with similar life experiences. So I think, before I even go on, I think what he's trying to do is make a distinction between black solidarity as it pertains to politics and ideology, as opposed to black community, which might be more related to heritage, culture, or lifestyle. But let's see. That's my foreshadowing here. Let's see. Some blacks may simply desire the intrinsic pleasure and comfort that comes from living among people with similar life experiences. Some may have grown up in these neighborhoods and are just more comfortable in familiar surroundings. Or they may view black communities as places of refuge from unwelcoming, predominantly white workplaces and schools. Can't tell though. Now with some of these guys tippity tapping. Tippy tippy tappy tippy toppy towel. A tippy towel to the cutty style. Tippy towel to the cutty style. Anyway, man, blacks sometimes prefer neighborhoods with a black critical mass, not only because they want to avoid white hostility and interracial conflict, practice political solidarity, sustain black institutions, or experience a sense of community. Where there is a greater residential concentration of blacks, there will also be a greater array of establishments and associations that cater to blacks' preferences and interests, such as hair salons and barbershops, clothing stores, places of worship, restaurants, bookstores, cinemas, music and dance venues, art galleries and theaters, and retail outlets that sell black hair care and skincare products. Their status as a numerical minority, 13% of the U.S. population, makes it rational for blacks to cluster in neighborhoods so that they can benefit from local organizations that cater to their distinctive tastes and needs. These various reasons for choosing black neighborhoods, if acted upon by a sufficient number of blacks, would contribute to and maybe even worsen segregation patterns. When such choices are motivated by racial prejudice, they're clearly wrong and incompatible with political ethics. But many of these reasons are perfectly legitimate and should not be dismissed or ignored in efforts to respond to ghetto poverty. So in other words, he's just come up with a whole host of reasons why black people might self-segregate or close ranks, not necessarily predicated upon political interest, but lifestyle, culture, or comfortability interests. And this somehow might interfere with the aim of the new integrationists who are seeking to obtain what the next section will cover, corrective justice predicated upon the disadvantage that accrues to people who happen to be denizens of the ghettos, which, of course, are disadvantaged neighborhoods where the people suffer from concentrated disadvantage. Now, the question is, do you want me to do this next section or do you want me to wait till the next time? Because I've been doing this for 1 hour and 16 minutes. I'm willing to go longer. If you want me to continue on with the next section, because the next section ends, it's 8 pages. It's eight pages. If you want me to go on with it, I will. If you want me to take a break and say, fuck it, we'll come back to it, we can come back to it. Put a 1 in the chat if you want me to go ahead and get through it. Put a 2 in the chat if you want me to go ahead and wait. 1 says keep on. I need to see numbers. 1, keep going. 2, hold up, slow up. I'm gonna weigh this. I see more 1s than 2s. Let's get it? Okay, let's get it. I'm gonna take a quick break. I'm gonna take a commercial break and come back to this. But please, if you can, I'm talking my motherfucking ass off. It wouldn't be nice to receive a little support in the form of either likes, subscriptions, or donations. The Cash App does work, man. Does work. I will be back after these small commercial breaks. I will be back. All right, man, I'm back. And I see more 1s than I do 2s. I know some of y'all are a little bit, antsy. Trust me, man, like this happens. Like if you're teaching a seminar, typically the seminars last like 2 hours and 30 minutes in some instances. Take a fucking break for 15 minutes or so, and then you get right back to it. That's how it goes. But shit, I mean, like if you really want to take a break, you can just hit pause on your damn computer, or you can just do something else. You know what I'm saying? So having said that, before I even begin, though, I do want to give a shout out to some people who just hit me up. I want to give a shout out to Anubis. Appreciate that donation, bro. Straight up. And of course, the Black Gnostic, he always gets his proper. And thank you, I know this material isn't like titillating. It's not like going off and talking about, because I was going to do a show. I think I will do one eventually on Passport Bros, but I'm into information dissemination. I'm not into a whole bunch of goddamn titillating bullshit, a whole bunch of motherfucking drama and nigga shit. I mean, trust me, if you want some nigga shit, I can give you some nigga shit. But I prefer to actually give you some information than to be seeped and seated in some stupid ass nigga shit. But that's just me. Says finish. Now, of course, I can't finish it all today. I'm just trying to get through certain sections. Now, we've already been through one section from chapter 2. We're going to go through another section, and I'm going to cut it off at page 67. Okay? But I'm committed to reading this entire work and going through it with you so that if people have questions about the ghetto and how to resolve the issues related to the ghetto, the people who live there, morality, when it comes to family formation, and we've barely scratched the surface of the text. Just to let you know. Okay? So shout out to Cameron S. He says, keep going. Yes, indeed. A.L. Evans, bro. Hey, bro. Not tonight, okay? No nigga shit tonight. No nigga shit tonight. So let me rewind on back to where I left off, okay? So it's about 6 or 7 pages, man. Integration and corrective justice, okay? He says, let's distinguish the new integrationist vision from other influential conceptions of integration. Okay? In the fight against Jim Crow, many civil rights activists viewed their efforts as a struggle for desegregation. The goal was to abolish the unjust legal exclusions and prohibitions of the segregation regime, a social system that granted whites privileges and advantages they weren't entitled to, while depriving blacks of rights, opportunities, and resources they were owed, and that stigmatized blacks as inferior. All that's correct. All of that is correct. To end discrimination in housing, education, employment, and lending, effective anti-discrimination laws were needed. There must be no race-based constraints on the use of public space, the receipt of public benefits, or access to social services. One's race must not be an impediment to receiving due process or the equal protection of the law. In the political sphere, desegregation meant granting blacks the unfettered right to vote and hold public office, and to the equitable sharing of political power and participation in public decision-making. But desegregation, so understood, is compatible with voluntary residential self-segregation. Now, and this is important, this is what he's really actually getting to. This is the important part of this paragraph. Desegregation is not incompatible, meaning that it is compatible with voluntary residential self-segregation. Thus, the new integrationists, while certainly favoring desegregation efforts, seek more than desegregation. So he's saying that the new integrationists are overstepping, is what he's saying. Okay? When people say a second ideal, like, where's the fucking, when did you say the word first? I hate when I like Tommy Shelby, but I fucking hate having to figure out where's the word first at. So where in the fuck is the first ideal? I guess the struggle for desegregation, I guess. I'll put that. I don't like that. Okay, I'm not showing the text. You're right. You're damn sure right. And I apologize for that. I should be showing the text. Okay, so I just read this paragraph. Okay, and I apologize for that not actually being, having been seen when I started reading it. Thank you, Ignaz Mouse, for pointing that out. Appreciate that. A second ideal has sometimes been described as social equality, but is better understood as an application of the right to freedom of association. Every individual should be free to interact, both in public and in private, and form relationships with the members of any race without molestation or legal constraint. This is the liberty to form and sustain intimate interracial bonds without the state or private individuals interfering with the exercise of this freedom. But it, too, is compatible with residential self-segregation because it includes the right not to seek such interracial bonds. Okay? So the right to freedom of association. It's compatible, social equality saying it's compatible with residential self-segregation, and I guess attempting to eliminate Jim Crow is also not incompatible with self-segregation. So what's the third ideal? National interracial solidarity. Whatever the fuck that's supposed to be. National interracial. Can't we all just get along? can't we all just get along? A society in which the members of different races have a sense of goodwill toward one another and think of themselves as collectively constituting one people. I've heard that and shit. It's so many guys on the internet right now promoting this idea. Some of them white, some of them black, but you know white people love to see black people say shit like this. We're all part of the same race. We're all one race, the human race. We're all one, man. We're all one. According to this vision, we should strive for interracial civic friendship, a sense of fraternity among members of a multiracial society of equals. This unity is to be founded on mutual respect and understanding. It cannot be a matter of legal requirements alone, but must be constituted by the shared and steadfast ethical commitment of individual members of society. Why? I just feel like I'm reading a fucking Heritage commercial or some shit. Some new integrationists endorse this ideal. It is not, however, their main reason for favoring residential integration. Residential diversity is a fourth ideal. According to this view, each neighborhood, or almost every neighborhood, should contain people from different racial groups in rough proportion to their presence in the region. Yet notice that a neighborhood could be diverse and still contain little, if any, friendly interracial interaction. Residential diversity in the abstract is more an aesthetic ideal than a moral one. However, the new integrationists see the worth of residential diversity in its potential to foster meaningful interracial relationships and cooperation. For them, it has instrumental value. So residential diversity has instrumental value. Instrumental value. The new integrationists view residential diversity as a necessary instrument for corrective justice. There we go. Now we get into the meat and potatoes. Now we get to the meat and potatoes. The new integrationists view residential diversity as a necessary instrument of corrective justice. It is, they believe, the only viable remedy for the disadvantages from which the ghetto poor suffer. They think the state has the authority and the obligation to promote residential integration through the force of law. Yet they don't think it should stop there, or at desegregation and social equality. So those are the ideals, right? In addition to helping to achieve the long-term goal of national interracial solidarity, residential integration is an attempt to reduce black-white inequality and to eliminate ghetto poverty by bringing blacks, particularly poor ones, into greater contact with advantaged whites. Integration on this view is a way of overcoming or mitigating unjust disadvantages that blacks experience. I discussed two variants of this vision. One emphasizes racial integration and the other economic integration. Okay, so we know that he's about to make a distinction. Okay, so there's a lot said here. So there's some people who believe that the state has the authority to promote residential segregation through the force of law. So in addition to helping achieve the long-term goal of national interracial solidarity, residential integration is an attempt to reduce black-white inequality and to eliminate ghetto poverty by bringing blacks into greater contact with advantaged whites. You know what that shit sounds like to me? I hate to say it. It sounds like some Will Smith shit. Now, you know what it really actually sounds like? Different Strokes. It sounds like Different Strokes. You remember that shit? What you talking about, Willis? Willis and Arnold? That used to be the show back in the day. That's exactly what, it sounds like some white savior shit. That's exactly what it sounds like to me. I don't know about to you, but it sounds like some white savior shit to me. I ain't necessarily down with it. I think it's sad. Poor little darkies by themselves. Poor little darkies, how can it be when they're in themselves, when they're amongst themselves, they're in misery? Poor little darkies. As much as we might bring you closer to white and thereby closer to light. That's my impromptu poetry on some bullshit levels, but okay. Let me push through this because we got 3 or 4 more pages to go. Elizabeth Anderson has offered the most comprehensive philosophical defense of racial integration as corrective injustice. So that's important to note. There is a white woman philosopher. Her name is Elizabeth Anderson. She's pretty popular. Look her up if you care to know who she is. But she's like, she wrote the book on racial integration as corrective justice. Okay, she too defends her conclusions within a liberal egalitarian framework, which we know is about not just negative liberty, it's not just equality of opportunity related to public positions and offices and even maybe private positions and offices in corporations and so on and so forth. But it's also liberal egalitarianism. It's about fair or substantive economic opportunity. Not necessarily exact, strict, equal outcome, but it is the idea that where you start shouldn't be a determinant of how you fare. You should have an equal opportunity to fare just as much as anybody from a different starting point in the society. That's the idea behind it. But she is also a leading proponent of a non-ideal political theory of racial inequality developed within the framework of the medical model. See, this is why he defined all of those terms. So that's why I went over the terms so that you can understand where we're going with this, okay? She is a leading proponent of a non-ideal political theory of racial inequality developed within the framework of the medical model. The differences between our approaches to segregation in ghettos are subtle but significant, and thus I give her views extended discussion. So much of what he's going to do here is reply and respond to a popular white woman who's calling for white savior shit. And he's going to say, well, hold up, miss. How you going to fucking tell us what we got to do in order to gain justice? Like we got to be among you? We have to live among you? It's like, you know, like, it's like, to me, it's like being around you. It's like we're being fucking inoculated from niggerness. I'm just telling you what it sounds like to me. I know he's gonna say it he's gonna respond in a much nicer way. I'm just getting to the nigger shit of it all, like expressing it in gross terms that a layperson from the hood who doesn't have the graduated terminology to express it. We need to be amongst you. We got to be close to you to be civilized. There we go. Supervision. He said this is more plantation babble. We got to be amongst you. Anyway, Anderson is concerned with problems of group-based disadvantage, which she attributes to segregation. Her defense of integration rests on a detailed empirical account of the underlying causes of Black disadvantages. She argues that today's residential segregation is the legacy of state-sponsored, overt housing discrimination and contemporary, private, though sometimes covert, discrimination. And I don't have a problem with that argument. I think that that's true. Today's residential segregation is the legacy of state-sponsored, overt housing discrimination and even contemporary discrimination. Processes of race-based residential exclusion, formal and informal, are the principal cause of group inequality, and these processes are unjust. Integration is thus a principle, or rather a set of principles, for correcting injustices, for responding to existing social problems traceable to unjust practices. According to Anderson, desegregation and social equality are insufficient to deal with unjust racial inequality because Blacks are deeply disadvantaged by social capital deficits. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Blacks are deeply disadvantaged by social capital deficits, which can be remedied only by greater Black-white interaction across multiple social domains, including neighborhoods. Social capital is understood. This is important. This is important. Anytime you see a term like this is important. All of this is going to be important. Bonding, bridging, social capital, all that's going to be important. Social capital is understood as the networks of associates through which knowledge of and access to opportunities are transmitted and norms of trust and reciprocity are enforced. So that's the definition. That's a fucking definition. The networks of associates through which knowledge of and access to opportunities are transmitted and norms of trust and reciprocity are enforced. That's what social capital is, and it comes in two forms: bonding and bridging. Bonding, social capital, is ties between people who share an identity, while bridging, social capital, is ties between people who have different social identities. So Anderson claims that segregation fosters strong intraracial bonding ties, but undermines the building of interracial bridging ties. Indeed, she believes the tendency of blacks and whites to associate within largely segregated social networks has profound negative consequences for black opportunity. This is a problem of justice, she argues, because access to jobs and educational opportunities is often gained by word of mouth, and blacks have limited access to white social networks. And look, I guarantee you, and I don't know exactly why at this juncture that Tommy Shelby has not made reference to Orlando Patterson, because I think that in principle or in part that Elizabeth Anderson's argument is predicated upon Orlando Patterson's. I guarantee you there's no white woman in the fucking Ivy League that's going to go out on a limb and talk about shit like this without having a black author to refer to. I guarantee you. Which is to some degree true. There is a shred of truth to what's being said here. Because people primarily get jobs by word of mouth or who they know. People often gain positions or access to positions and opportunities predicated upon who they know. Not necessarily what they know, but who they know. That's why it's often said, it ain't what you know, it's who you know. This woman is not a member of the tribe. She is a white woman. So Anderson insists that unjust black-white inequality can be overcome fully only if blacks join white social networks so that their bridging capital can be increased, with the result that whites give blacks vital information about and thus access to employment and educational opportunities. God damn. What? 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 So look, again, here's the crux of what she's saying. Unjust black-white inequality can only be fully overcome if blacks join white social networks so that their bridging capital can be increased, with the result that whites give blacks vital information about and access to employment and educational opportunities. It is the need to increase black social capital, she maintains, that makes integration beyond desegregation and social equality an imperative of justice. Owen Fisk, it's another individual, so this is another person entering into the conversation who he's responding to. Owen Fisk has defended economic integration as a form of corrective justice, or as corrective justice. He too is a liberal egalitarian working within a medical model framework. And of course, we've already covered the fact that Tommy Shelby does not like the medical model approach because it leads to what he would consider to be status quo bias. Right? Also, he says it would lead to the problem of downgraded agency, which is that maybe sometimes what blacks are doing is not because they're just fucking pathological, but because they're resistant against the fuck shit that white people are doing. Also, the medical model has the effect of oftentimes creating blind spot problems to people who have unjust advantages. Just to put it all in perspective. This believes that concentrated poverty creates a debilitating and destructive culture in the ghettos. There we go, the culture component. Find out who Owen Fisk is. What this motherfucker Owen Fisk look like, bro? Owen Fisk. This is a white boy, Yale law professor and shit. So I just want you to see these people, man. I want you to see them. Let me make this shit small. I want you to see these motherfuckers here, bro. I want you to see what? I see. So that's Owen Fisk. Okay, that's Owen Fisk. This is Elizabeth Anderson. That's Elizabeth Anderson. All right? So now you know what we're looking at here. Come on, bro. This motherfucker said Metal Gear Solid. Come on, bro. Come on, dog. Anyway. Concentrated poverty creates debilitating and destructive cultures in ghettos, one that inhibits the black poor from taking advantage of any educational or employment opportunities that might be created. The only hope, he thinks, is to eliminate ghettos and thus their distinctive subculture. There it is. Got to get rid of the subculture. Got to get rid of you ignorant ass niggas. His proposal is to move. He wants to move. What the fuck? To move the ghetto poor to middle class or upper class neighborhoods. What? Are you serious, bro? Are you serious, bro? That's the way out of this shit, right? This solution is premised on the idea that the black poor mustn't be too concentrated, or else a culture of poverty will continue to flourish. These more advantaged neighborhoods already have high quality schools, ample employment opportunities, low crime rates, good public services, so these needn't be created by government action. Even if the black adults who move don't reap the socioeconomic benefits themselves, the cycle of poverty would be broken because their children would grow up in more enriching and safe environments with good schools and positive role models. Is this motherfucker serious, bro? Oh, bro, look, man. Hey, bro. Bro. Well, I feel you, BGS. Yeah, but this ain't gentrification. Because gentrification is putting white people in primarily black neighborhoods and bouncing them out. But I guess over time they can have the effect of removing the ghetto poverty altogether. But we already know how this shit works, bro. I'm gonna leave BGS's comment there so I don't forget it. First of all, you gotta factor in, look, on a reality tip, you gotta factor in white flight. What, you gonna force white people to not move when you get a whole bunch of niggas moving into where they at? Come on, bruh. Like, the shit is unrealistic, dog. Anyway, Fisk thinks such economic integration is a requirement of justice. It is an effective remedy for a great injustice the state has actively perpetrated and been complicit in. The inner city ghetto stands before us as an instrument of subjugation and thus represents the most visible and perhaps most pernicious vestige of racial injustice in the United States, the successor to slavery and Jim Crow. This is Owen Fisk now. He argues that the state, by engaging in and acquiescing in a range of discriminatory practices, produced and maintained ghettos, and so the public has an obligation not only to prevent racial discrimination, but also to remedy its negative consequences for the victims. Now, I don't have a problem on principle with that. It's just the methodology that they're going about in order to try to remedy the situation. And I think the same thing that I'm saying now is what Tommy Shelby's going to end up saying. This is a corrective justice argument which Fisk distinguishes from a narrow compensatory justice argument. Okay, so now we're making a distinction between corrective justice and compensatory justice. God damn. But trust me, we're almost done with this section. We got like this one paragraph going. Finish this one and get to the last one, okay? So how do you distinguish corrective justice from compensatory justice? Compensatory justice demands that the victims of past injustice be brought to the level of well-being they would have attained had the injustice not occurred. By contrast, Fisk argues that ongoing unjust practices have created a system of subordination that the perpetrators have an obligation to dismantle. He is advocating economic integration as a principle of social reform, not as reparations. So this is a corrective justice, not a compensatory justice approach. So he's already making that distinction, okay? I'm assuming that Tommy Shelby is going to say, okay, what we need is compensatory justice. We need fucking reparations. I'm not sure. I haven't read all of it, but it seems like this is what he's implying here. Maybe not, though. I don't know. Four-fifths. This poverty deconcentration strategy does not aim at racial integration. The ghetto poor should be enabled to move to whatever neighborhoods they like, black, white, integrated, or whatever, provided the neighborhoods have low poverty rates. Okay, so that maybe I'm wrong about the fifth guy. His aim is to deconcentrate black poverty so as to avoid its associated ills. The trouble is, economic integration generally means racial integration because there are very few communities, black communities, with low poverty rates. Only enough to absorb a tiny percentage of the ghetto poor. And given racial clustering, those majority black neighborhoods with moderate poverty rates, say 20 to 30%, that do exist. So in other words, type 2 ghettos that do exist are right next to, or, like shade into, elide into, to ghettos. So they're adjacent to ghettos or would quickly reach unacceptable poverty concentrations if a significant number of the ghetto poor were to move to them, contrary to the corrective justice objective. Most advantaged neighborhoods are either already integrated or are majority white, with few, if any, black families. And this is the last paragraph, and then I'll invite anybody to have a conversation about this if they want to. If they don't, I'm out of this hole. Racial integration and economic integration are two distinct approaches in terms of rationale, if not practically speaking, for responding to spatially concentrated black disadvantage. So two approaches. I got a lot to put into my glossary. These two related solutions to ghetto poverty can be used in combination, as they were in the Chicago Ghetto program. Somebody look that up for me, man. The Chicago Ghetto program. What the hell is that, man? What is that, man? I need somebody to figure out what that is. Both advocate addressing ghetto poverty by re-engineering neighborhoods in an effort to bring poor blacks into greater contact with whites or the affluent. The two visions rest on the idea that racial inequality and ghetto poverty are explained, at least in part, by the patterns of informal social interaction and the cultural norms that people are exposed to in their residential communities. So it is not just that the ghetto neighborhoods are disadvantaged, have few accessible decent jobs, lack affordable housing, are served by substandard schools, suffer from high crime rates, and so on. Though this is clearly part of the problem, according to the new integrationist vision, concentrated disadvantage is also perpetrated by how social networks and cultural dynamics within and across neighborhoods mediate access to goods, opportunities, and services. I think that's the important drawaway. Okay, so extended clips, I think, is giving me an understanding of what the Ghetto program is, the Chicago Ghetto program. I think that's what it is. Again, you got any questions, you want to make any comments, now's the time to do it. This shit is interesting to me because typically black people use what's the medical model that black folks have in order to remedy any of these situations from the ghetto or about the ghetto. Especially in a space like the black manosphere, the only thing I hear them either say is kill niggas, murder them to death, leave them to fucking fester in the ghettos, and start your own communities elsewhere. Or what? Oh, man. What are you guys proposing? At least this is a proposal, right? How do you get rid of the ghettos? But at least these white people are acknowledging, at least Elizabeth Anderson and Owen Fisk are acknowledging that ghettos in and of themselves are cultural artifacts of injustice, previous injustice. At least they're willing to admit that shit. I don't see how SYSBM is gonna, like, what is SYSBM gonna do to the ghetto? You can save yourself, but okay, so you save yourself, you look out for self, right? So you move to a white neighborhood. Is that like significant enough to create like an entirely different social reality for black folks? I mean, I'm just asking the question practically, philosophically. Man, look, bro, this is what I do know. Ignatius Mouse, why don't you call up, man? You call up. It don't matter who call up. Somebody need to call, because I know this shit on y'all minds. Anyway, man, shout out to Ignatius Mouse, man. Appreciate him. Appreciate that, Ignatius. Shout out to Extended Clips. Shout out to him. Shout out to David Caldwell. He says, pass the plate, folks. This knowledge ain't free. Shout out to Master Teacher, GG. Word. You see, look, let me just say this, man. I don't want to hear too many motherfuckers talking about ghetto shit. Especially if you ain't gonna have the nuts to join the conversation. That's how I look at it, man. My whole disposition is I don't want to hear too many Negroes in the black manosphere talking about strags and pookies and shit if they're not really actually willing to have a deep-seated and an ongoing conversation about the systematic way in which the ghetto was created and academic and political propositions to mediate the conditions which exist or to resolve the injustices or to redress the injustices. I don't want to hear too much of shit niggas talking for real. Corey, man, what's cracking with you, man? How you doing, bro?
What's going on, Gigi? How you feeling?
What's that? I'm feeling good, man. I can't complain. You know I'm gonna complain, but
yeah,
you know, I'm only complaining about like what is the solution. A lot of people say, okay, well, we gotta. I mean, one proposal I have is, and I think it's a good one, enfranchise black men.
Yeah, I don't see that happening just because we're public enemy number one, right? And now they're like, I see that happening less now because like they're importing other men from other countries, from foreign, hostile foreigners essentially into the country at rates that we've never seen before, and it's become a part of the American nucleus, similar to the whole LGBT movement. These movements with immigrants and LGBT, they're kind of being used to prop these other groups up over us. Um, I don't know if it's because we haven't made enough noise. I'm not really sure what the issue is, but again, like, because I know my history, I know that we're not really responsible for our predicament. Like, we are and we aren't. You know what I mean? Um, in the 60s and 70s, there was a reckoning that was coming to America. Things were going to change, and then these movements were stopped because all the leaders were essentially assassinated. Um, and we haven't really picked up from there. We haven't advanced politically from there. Our model, our political model, is the same um, as it was back then. Like, we haven't, you know what I mean? We haven't flowed with the times. We haven't changed and adapted to the times. You know what I mean? And now with like states like California and Nevada and other places who are now allowing non-citizens, or they're putting forward non-citizens to become police officers and work in law enforcement, that's just another tool that is going to be used against us. You know what I mean? Like, so I think like, and so I think that when people talk about SYSBM, I don't think it's about saving the community. Like, I think it's about saving individuals and adapting on an individual level, and it's going to be survival of the fittest. I think that's what's gonna come of this, because we're actually, to me, we're in the middle of a genocide. So, I mean, what do you say about that?
Well, I understand your frustration, and I understand your skepticism, and I understand the idea of, well, the only thing I can really do is just try to look out for Dolo. You know what I'm saying? Like, I got to look out for me and maintain my own integrity in a hostile environment, and maybe if I make it out, maybe I can develop a family of some kind and try to.
Yeah, I mean,
but that shit ain't working either. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean,
yeah, I'm not saying that it is. I'm not advocating. I'm just looking at the mindset. I'm just trying to break down the mindset. Like, I'm not advocating for or against. I think everybody's going to do what they do as individuals, at the end of the day. But I think a large part of it is like our women. We have to, if we're going to save communities, right? Like, we have to be able to work with our women. And it's beaten like, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but at this time, like, it doesn't really seem like, for whatever reason, that's happening. Like, I'm seeing a lot of social. I mean, and people, the smallest groups of people are always the loudest with the craziest ideologies. But it seems like, again, key word, that's not really happening. Like, the connections are not really happening because the women seem to exist in such a state of delusion that I don't really foresee. Like, for instance, like, I don't know if you're married or you're in a relationship, but how often are you able to have these kinds of conversations with Black women in the first place? You know what I mean? Like, these conversations have to become commonplace. And unfortunately, like, the coffee table or the water cooler discussions that we're having as a people seem to be more about like supporting Democrats more so than Black nationalism or the survival of the Black culture, the Black American culture. You know what I mean?
right. Well,
So,
I would read what his response to all of this is, but I think it would be, like, it's overkill at this point, even for me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'd have been talking for 2 hours. And I mean, and a person can only sustain concentration or focus on an issue for so long before, it begins to get weary, especially if there's no conversation. I'm just reading from a text. It's not like the most enthralling thing that an individual can do in order to hold people's attention or to get them to understand a concept or idea or anything of that nature, man. So I understand. I get it. But I think, in the end, it would be good if white people actually had the heart to treat people who exist outside of their so-called racial group as human beings. But see, white people do close ranks for bad reasons. You know, like they're afraid that something's going to be taken away from them. Something's going to be, you know, it's like they perceive economics as a zero-sum game when economics really is not a zero-sum game. It doesn't have to be. Okay?
Yeah, it's like, yeah.
I mean, but at the same time, I think that, you know, like a lot of people proposed initially that, okay, in order to mitigate this issue, these problems that come from the ghetto culture and so on, like what we need to do is we need to basically, because this is how family shit goes, right? Women want to marry niggas that got good jobs, right? Who are stable and who can support families. That's what the fuck they want, right?
I don't think I don't know. You know, I couldn't even tell you. Like, I know women in other countries do, and maybe countries that are less economically prosperous. I know they do, and maybe even in some Western states they do. They appreciate because they understand. Like, we have a state. We have like the, you know, like whiteness is like the state, right? The government, right? So they understand that, like, if we have the state supplementing and providing jobs and providing for women, and we're able to undermine. I mean, we've had these conversations all the time and time again. You know, we talk about how welfare impacted black families in the 60s and 70s, and how women were handpicked. Black women were handpicked to get these positions, these corporate positions, these judge positions, and now we're seeing the fallout from that, to where everything is delusional. You know, they say that the man's not in the home, but then, you know, when you look up the Pew Research and the CDC studies, it says that black men seem to be the most participatory parents or fathers in America. So, but at the same time, the popular narrative and discourse is that black men are not taking care of their children, black men are having children, and really a lot of the time, like, that propaganda that used to come from, you know, white people, it's espoused by black women, you know, and the younger women, you see a lot of younger women like millennials and Generation Z women that are talking like this. And these women haven't even been in any worthwhile or long-term relationships, you know? So I don't know. You know, but I do know that for me personally, like, I don't think the solution is going to be, but I'll say it to you like this, like, the solution has already been given to us, right? Like, for instance, like Booker T. Washington, he talks about economic empowerment. He didn't really talk about economic integration. You know, he saw the situation that we would be in today. He you know, a lot of people like to call him out and say that he was cooning or whatever the case may be, but we would be in a whole lot better if we owned the means of production, if we had production, if we had factories, if we had the land. You know what I mean? And also self-defense. These are the basic tenets that any civilization lives by: self-defense and the means of production and consumption, the circling of the dollar. You know, we talk about these things all the time ad nauseum. You know what I'm saying? But we don't, you know, we talk about, you know, oh, the dollar only circulates 1 or 2 times in the black American community. But we don't talk about the fact that when we build, because we are building, we do build, we continuously build. For instance, Courtney and Nicole Mallory in Colorado. Are you familiar with them?
Never heard of them.
Okay, these are 2 black Americans. They have a 1,000-acre farm in Colorado. I can't remember the exact county, but they have cattle, they have chickens, they have goats, they have, you know, dogs, everything. And they're being racially harassed by the law enforcement there and the local white people. So this is what we have to deal with when we try to do things. People, and, you know, it's always pull yourself up by the bootstrap. But when we begin to do that, when we purchase land, when we do the things that we need to do, there's always that violence. There's always that military arm of white supremacy that's basically punching down on us. You know what I mean?
So that's the catch-22 of the Booker T. Washington position. You know, so, you know, the catch-22 is, we already know, like, okay, so directly after, and let me get out of this thing right here. I still want to keep the, this visual going, but I want to show you some shit, right? So, I know Sandog was talking about that's what the school he went to. He went to fucking Thaddeus Stevens, who was a representative from Pennsylvania. He was a radical Republican. He hated slavery and discrimination against black Americans, so he sought to eliminate it. So I can fuck with that white boy, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the white boys you can fuck with, right?
Probably the only one.
So you had black people like Tunis Campbell directly after, you know, slavery, like doing Reconstruction. So he, the oldest and best known clergyman of the African Methodist Church. He was a voter registration organizer. He was a justice of the peace, a delegate to the Georgia Constitutional Convention, and was a senator for the state of Georgia during the Reconstruction era. Okay? So you also had, like, that's just one example, right? You had people like William F. Butler, American politician, African-American leader, born in Jefferson County, Kentucky, who became president of the Negro Republican Party that was formed after the Civil War. Okay? He moved to New York and became a New York delegate, okay, in the House of Representatives. But then you have Blanche Bruce, born into slavery, went on to become a politician who represented Mississippi as a Republican in the United States Senate, the first elected African-American senator to serve a full term. So you have brothers, man, who were actually making inroads at that time. If this shit would have just been left unfettered and unchecked, one could argue we might have been all right. Black people were engaging not only in politics, but they were also engaged in the development and the cultivation of farmland in the South. Many people in, the West, Southwest, like Texas, they were buying oil rigs and striking oil. They were developing burgeoning economies in like small places like Greensville, Tulsa. I mean, black people were being thrifty and industrious.
The problem with that, though, the problem with the Reconstruction era and continuing into the modern era is the refusal for self-defense. Like, that's the issue. When you can't rely on white people, right? To protect you from white people.
They didn't say to themselves, like, okay, we're not going to defend ourselves. I mean, but come on, bro. Like, have you ever been in a fist fight with 6 motherfuckers at the same time?
Absolutely not. I would never like to be.
We just saw what happens when you got one black dude who just gets accosted by 5 motherfuckers with guns and batons and shit like that.
Right.
So, I mean, and like for example, Tunis Campbell, right? This guy, he had a 400-person militia in the South after Reconstruction. He reportedly had a 400-person militia to protect himself from the Ku Klux Klan. But eventually, he had to flee the state to save his life. It wasn't like these guys weren't making an attempt to protect themselves. It wasn't like, oh, master, would you please not hurt me? It was like, motherfucker, you want it, you're going to get it. A lot of these guys served in the Union Army.
Yeah.
But
well, it seemed to be... Well, what I was going to say is that the self-defense thing seemed to be more, after they killed MLK, Dr. King, when they murdered him, and brothers and sisters went out in the streets for that week, and they really, really got on some real serious, we are going to cause chaos. We're going to call, we are going to fight back now because we're in open war. That seemed to make a lot of things, like they don't talk about that at all. I think it was called Hell Week or something like that, but they never talk about that. They never talk about the fact that when we actually, we're not going to work culturally across, everybody's going to participate in self-defense. Everybody, the women, the children, the men, everybody, the animals, everybody's going to participate in self-defense. That's where we're at. Everybody, it has to be like the state of Israel. Everybody has to be drafted into this military for 2 years. Everybody needs to be trained to a certain level, and everybody needs to be able to defend themselves. Everybody. But now what we have is a lot of zesty dudes. We got a lot of catty dudes. We got a lot of weirdos. We got a lot of LGBT. There's a lot of confusion, mass confusion, maximum confusion, like Neely Fuller says. That's what we have now. You know what I'm saying? So
that's on purpose, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Because what I'm gonna tell you, the Black student movement. That's why I put that video out here. I don't know. Let me go back to the screen, bro. Present. Share screen. I'm gonna go window, Window ain't even open yet. It's a Chrome tab when I come to it, though. Hold on. YouTube. Let me go to my channel, bro. Okay, I'm trying to find the shorts, man. So, you know, like, at a time, there was a time when black folks had a quality of understanding to where the things that they were advocating for and arguing for were a lot different qualitatively than what black folks are arguing for now. Like, for instance, I put this out there from Bobby Wright.
Now, what happened, white women came out and captured our women and convinced us that white women were not as racist as white men, and convinced us, or convinced our women, that they would place them above their husbands, their brothers, their lovers, their children, their sons, and we say, then the white gays came out and convinced our gays it was a gay struggle and stole our gays, you know, okay? White students came out and grabbed our black students, said it was a student struggle, and wiped out our black students. And all of a sudden, we up to wondering, where's the fight? You know what I mean? You know, it's not a black. So now they're coming up with books such as, book is The Declining Significance of Race.
Now, motherfuckers used to be on some pro-black shit. Like, what are we doing wrong? Now, if you even suggest it, you're trying to, you know, act like white people, or you're trying to replicate a patriarchal nationalist state that's going to be exclusive or marginalizing towards people with queer identities and shit like this. It is what it is. And not only that, like, take for instance, another clip. If I can go back.
You see, the word sexism was created to replace the word racism. Women's studies was created to replace black studies. You see? And now they've raised up black feminists to replace the real system.
People used to be on it. Even white women know. That's why I put this video. This is the white woman who fought against the ERA. Okay? And she was like, women already got a whole bunch of benefits in this damn culture and society. Now, this is a married woman who, her husband was an attorney, but she took care of the kids. And then after she got through taking care of the kids, she basically became an attorney herself. She went to law school and all that kind of shit. Now, you can tell this is a white woman's white woman. You can look at her mannerisms and tell this is a fucking true blue ass white woman.
Why not civil rights? He said the back of the bus, and you said no, that should be
civil rights question has moved to the federal level. I support that.
Well, why civil rights on race but not on sex?
Because it's a different question. Women have not been treated like blacks. I certainly do not subscribe to the view that women have been treated like blacks.
She already know that the sexism, just like Brenda Verner said, they already knew sexism wasn't the equivalent of racism. They already understood it. But nobody actually gives a shit about it anymore. You know what I'm saying? And even people like Dr. Amos Wilson knew that the civil rights movement in and of itself, it wasn't the vision that we had was like, we want to be able to have access to what white people have, but without the power to sustain it. Black people are left in a fucking quandary, bro. What was supposed to correct the injustices, the 64 Civil Rights Act, has been basically given to women and gays and shit. It just is what it is, bro. It is. Now, how do you solve the problem? I mean, you know, the new integrationism, man, you know, they taking black men, they putting their asses in jail cells, bro.
Yeah,
like,
so
you know, you know, the response is, let's build prisons, let's invest in metallic beds and iron bars, bro. You know, it's what we dealing with, and it's unfortunate that we doing it to ourselves now. Like, you know, already know the highest form of death between our youngest The warrior class is anybody from the ages of what? 14 to 30 what? 35. That's your warrior class right there. You know who we at war with?
Definitely each other.
We killing each other.
But the thing is, like, we're not, you know, and I can even speak to my own personal, you know, I'm always speaking from an empirical perspective, and an anecdotal perspective. You know, we as a race or as a group of people, as an ethnic group, we don't really, like, at this point, we don't value educating our youth and our children on these different ideologies. Like, the first mistake is, like, why are you sending your kids to these schools? Like, why are you sending your kids to public schools? You know what I mean? Like, that's it's suicidal. The very actions that we take that we deem as normal are actually suicidal, self-destructive actions. The things that we view as normal, sending our kids to, you know, American University and to Harvard and Yale and Princeton, like, though that is suicidal, because you're throwing your children to the wolves. They're going to hate themselves, number one. And then number two, you're creating a management class of coons instead of a warrior class of intellectuals. You're not creating Thomas Sankaras. You know what I mean? You're creating more Jason Whitlocks. You see what I'm saying?
You know, I get it. You know, and, you know, the one thing I know is, and I started to say, like, initially, the Black Studies programs all throughout the country, man, was started by pro-black nationalist thinkers. You know, Afrocentric scholars. Like, I mean, you know, like Dr. Amos Wilson or Molefe Kete Asante or, you know, Moala Karenga or, you know, like just radical guys. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, but then all of these programs became attenuated, and especially at the Ivy League schools. Like, white people hired at these universities people they felt comfortable with and people that they can indoctrinate. And people who had ideas that were akin to theirs or had visions of what progressiveness looked like according to, you know, their own taste and dictates. And so all of, like, the revolutionary pro-black shit, it's gone. That's why I showed the Brenda Verner thing. Like, the women's studies programs were meant and intended to replace the black studies programs. Who was first? Who came first? Racism in and of itself was first. It was prior to, you know, like, this whole issue about sexism, especially in terms of the civil rights movement. We're the ones that started this whole spirit, the zeitgeist of civil resistance.
Of liberalism.
But then everybody else piggybacked off of it and got the benefits from it. And we still, like, in poverty fucking 60 years later. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, and it's reached a critical point now. Like, I just got back to the States from Southeast Asia, and it's reached, like, I've been out of the States for the past, like, 3 or 4 years, and like, things to me seem to be terrible. Like, you don't even see, like, many brothers walking the streets anymore. Like, I'll just say where I'm at. So the population of brothers ain't that high where I'm at anyway. I'm in Key West, Florida, unfortunately. But
it's all good.
Like, you don't really see brothers representing at all. Like, you don't really see that at all. Like, you don't see. It's, like, shocking to people when they see a normal looking brother, because the brothers that they do see is either, you know, it's either the, you know, the ghetto, you know, I guess you could say your Pookie and Ray Ray, which to me that even that doesn't exist. Like, even those dudes seem to be in a decline. You know what I mean? Even the tough street thug, that's in a decline. Like, that's not even a thing anymore. You know, based off what I've seen. You know what I mean? Like, and if it does exist, it exists in black ghettos. It doesn't exist in the mainstream, or they're not really doing anything. You know, a lot of those dudes are afraid to leave whatever, you know, cordoned off area that they have access to. You know, so even that is, like, limited. You don't really see many regular brothers out and about at all, in mass, in force. So I think the number one thing is for us to, you know, come together, have reading clubs, have, you know, weapons club, whatever the case may be, come together, get together, organize. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, like Neely Fuller says, the four-wallism, where you have an organization like the Black Panthers that can be pointed out, handcuffed, and arrested. It doesn't even necessarily need to be like that, but you know, you have brothers, we have cousins, we have uncles. Why don't we get together and start a book club? Hey, why don't we get together and read a chapter of The Man Not on a weekly basis? Why don't we get together and go out and speak to women and see what the pulse is going on with these women instead of complaining about them? Why don't we work together to build different platforms and industries to actually compete? Why don't we have more respect for each other as men so that in turn the women won't have a choice but to acquiesce? Why are we competing over women when there's more women than men? There's more Black American women in America than there are Black American men, to the tune of several million. So the way that we're operating out of scarcity when we should have an abundant mindset when it comes to women, when it comes to resources, when it comes to whatever we want. Because we can get it, we just have to work together. That's the number one thing. Any race that works. Listen, I was in Pattaya, Thailand last month. Okay, everybody knows that, you know, people globally don't really like Indians. People globally don't really like Arabs, but those motherfuckers can get together and pop businesses off with no issues. They can work together with all their caste system and all their bullshit and all their cultural nonsense that they have. They can get together and create spaces for themselves in foreign countries. Why can't we do that? And then we can say, okay, racism, yeah, but guess what? Racism doesn't impact you as badly if you have a protective circle around yourself. And that starts by having the soft skills, learning how to speak to each other. Many of us don't even know how to interact with each other. Many of us don't know how to speak to each other in a respectful manner. Many of us in the workplace, you know, in the workspace, when there's us and then there's white people, there's this weird animosity that we have towards each other. We got to drop shit like that. You know what I mean? It's about having common understanding and decency toward each other because we have a shared struggle, whether we like it or not, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you know, hey, man, all I can do, you know, I'm trying to start a reading club myself by reading academic philosophy about the issues the guys talk about here all the time. I'm here to read it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, but I want to have a sophisticated conversation instead of just, you know, using a hackneyed and trite argument about personal responsibility and bootstrapism and about cultural backwardness in order to explain what the actually, you know, what the actual phenomena is. I just don't have time, man, for fuckery anymore. You know, like, I want to have sophisticated and adult conversations as opposed to, you know, average sophomorish nigga conversations about, you know, I love the barbershop myself, but we got to evolve past the barbershop, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, you know, if we're going to talk about the issues, let's talk about them, man. And not be afraid to talk about them. And then also, you know, like, even in this space, man, it's a lot of guys, man, who are like insulting as shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, deprecating as hell towards other black men. They don't even like black men. You know what I'm saying? So, like, you're in a black male space called the black manosphere, but like you'll go off on another black individual, a black man, in a minute, and then create shows and shit about them, and create slander. Like, that's what bitches do, is like slander people and shit like that. I've never seen it, man, but you know, it is what it is, man. And I'm not animated. You know, I'm not animated by views and clicks and shit like that. I'm not animated by, you know, like, respect within this space to the point where I'm like willing to do anything to get it. So I'm not going to prostitute myself or, you know, create a whole bunch of hype and shit like that. Like, I'm not doing this under any false pretenses. I want you guys to be informed. I want you to know what is possible to know related to an issue or a subject so you can think the thing through holistically and meticulously, as opposed to just offering folk wisdom, because that shit ain't working for us. Folk wisdom is not working. So, but you know, man, I appreciate your contribution, bro. You know, I'll take that into consideration, what you say. Always feel free to come up, step up and to comment. But you know, like, I'm almost 2 hours and 30 minutes in. Well, I am 2 hours and 30 minutes in. I'm getting hoarse, man, and I'm hungry as hell. I gotta eat.
Appreciate it. Appreciate the time, man. You know,
Yes,
I'm
sir,
a big fan. Been a follower, subscriber for a long time. So about 3-4 years now at this point. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Hey, man, appreciate you, man. Your presence, man. People like you help me stay afloat. You know
Yes, sir. Much respect.
Much respect, bro. So, you know, we getting ready to close out, man. I appreciate you coming and viewing this video, man. This live. Again, you know, if you can, please support the Green Gorilla channel. The Cash App works, the Super Chats, all that shit works. PayPal works, you know, Patreon works. If you, you know, like the content and you feel that there's some value in it, consider a membership on either YouTube or Patreon, or consider a donation, man. You know, like I got to keep this thing going. It ain't easy to do, you know, on a day-to-day basis, but I'm dedicated to it. You know what I'm saying? So, having said all that, man, y'all be peaceful, man. I will be back with another installment of this week because I don't want it to be too much time to elapse anymore in getting through at least this chapter. So I'll come with, maybe even tomorrow, I'll come with Ghetto Ish 7. But this book, man, we've only cracked the surface. We haven't even begun to explore what he's got to say about culture. So having said all that, man, y'all be peaceful, man. I'll holler at y'all on the next one, bro. One. And shout out for the dollar holler on the Cash App. Let me make sure I got everybody covered in terms of they shouts out related to that. So shout out to T Fitness for you. Appreciate you, bro, as always. Olia. I don't know how to pronounce the first one. It's KXRE, but much love and support. Thank you. Appreciate it, bro. To Nana, appreciate you, bro. And to Carl Hudson, appreciate you, bro. Appreciate all y'all, man. Y'all keeping me, you know, keep me inspired and keep me able to do this, you know. And also, man, like, if you are interested in that lo-fi shit, man, let me know. Otherwise, man, I'm about to cut that shit off. I put it on another channel. I can't keep it going without having support for it. I'm not about to pay $50 a month, but some shit ain't nobody watching. I'm about to cut that shit off. So let me know if y'all want to keep it going or you don't give a fuck about it going at all. So just let me know. So I'll holler at y'all later, man. Peace. Oh, man, before I go, man, let me do this. Because one brother basically asked me if I got any T-shirts or some shit like that. Like, if you really wanted to get a T-shirt, man, this is how you have to do it, bro. Okay? I know I said I was gone, but I want to make sure this brother here, Grab Second Gear Eddie, knows exactly what to do. So I have a channel, man, or not a channel, but a website called the Green Gorilla Channel, man. That's the name of it, greengorillachannel.com. Okay? You want to get a T-shirt, man? Come to the shop. Boom, there you go. You got hoodies, stickers. I ain't got no mugs and no shit like that, but I got tees, man, you know what I'm saying? Jackets, shit like that. Not really, you know, coffee. I do have coffee mugs. Face, man, ain't nobody wearing face masks no more, but you get the picture, man. You know, I got different shit you can cop, man. So that's where you can cop it at, man, if you have any interest. So just showing y'all that, man. So anyway, man, I'm out of here, man. I'll holler at y'all on the next one, dog. Peace.